Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're breaking down the immediate economic and supply chain impacts of the sweeping 2026 packaging regulations hitting the fast-moving consumer goods sector. Look, if you're anywhere in the packaging, polymer, or consumer goods supply chain, you are absolutely going to want to pay very close attention to this. To put things into perspective, India alone consumes tens of billions of pan masala sachets every single year. It's an industry of just staggering scale. And right now, we're looking at a tectonic shift in how these high-volume products even make it to market. The ripple effects here are going to be absolutely massive across the entire ecosystem.
Our briefing today relies on some vital market intelligence straight from Polymer Bazaar. We're using their data to analyze exactly how this regulatory shift is creating such massive market disruption. In an industry where literally a fraction of a cent per unit dictates profitability, you basically need a crystal ball to navigate this kind of supply chain shock. They're the premier source for price, prediction, and profit metrics in the polymer space. And their insights are going to help us map out exactly who the winners and the losers are going to be in this brand new regulatory landscape.
So here is our roadmap for today. We'll start with the FSSAI pan masala ban itself, compare permitted versus banned materials, look at the slump in flexible plastics, cover the disruptions for packaging converters, the surge in alternative packaging, and wrap up with pricing and the market outlook.
Let's jump right into Section 1, the FSSAI Pan Masala Ban, a massive regulatory catalyst.
Okay, published on August 10, 2026, this regulation strictly targets the high-volume pan masala sector. The goal? To curb the massive environmental pollution caused by non-recyclable multi-layered flexible plastic waste. Now, the Food Safety and Standards Authority of India, the FSSAI, isn't just tweaking the rules here. They are completely rewriting the playbook. And you really have to understand why this specific product was targeted. These tiny, multi-layered sachets are literally everywhere. Because they combine plastic and metal layers, they're notoriously difficult to recycle, and they usually just end up clogging waterways or piling up by the millions in landfills. So by officially banning plastic, aluminum foil, and metallized layers for this specific product, the FSSAI is taking direct aim at a huge contributor to flexible plastic waste. Now, in the regular world, a regulatory deadline of 2026 might seem like a comfortable distance away. But if you work in large-scale manufacturing, 2026 is practically tomorrow. Designing new packaging, sourcing alternative materials, testing shelf stability, and retooling entire factory lines, that's a process that takes years. The clock is ticking loudly.
Moving on to Section 2, permitted versus banned materials, the new rules of engagement.
To really grasp the business realities here, we need to clearly delineate what's acceptable and what's out. The absolute backbone of traditional pouch and sachet packaging, we're talking single-use plastics, plastic laminates, metallized films, and aluminum foil layers, is completely off the table. Manufacturers simply cannot use them anymore. Full stop. It is a hard, legally mandated pivot away from legacy materials. In their place, the industry has to transition entirely to a completely different class of substrates. The permitted future is now plastic-free paper, paperboard, cellulose, naturally derived materials, glass, and tin containers. This isn't just a gentle nudge to, use a little less plastic. It's a foundational shift in how these products will be packaged and delivered to consumers.
Which brings us to Section 3, slump in flexible plastics, immediate demand contraction.
In terms of immediate market impact, this ban triggers a severe demand slump in the flexible plastics sector. Domestic demand for specific polymers like BOPP, PET, and the polyethylene used for inner sealing layers is going to experience a sharp, sudden contraction. Let's break down exactly why these specific materials were the holy grail for packagers to begin with. BOP, which is biaxially oriented polypropylene, and PET, or polyester, are incredibly cheap to produce. Not to mention they run at lightning speeds on massive packaging machines, and they weigh virtually nothing. They're the flawless structural and visual layers of the pouches we see every single day. Then you have PE, specifically linear low-density and low-density polyethylene, the absolute workhorse consumed in vast quantities for the inner layers that melt and fuse the pouches shut. Because the pan masala and gutka sectors consume such astronomical quantities of these pouches, yanking this entire product category out of the flexible plastic ecosystem creates an immediate gaping hole in domestic polymer demand. We're literally talking about thousands of tons of material demand vanishing overnight.
So what does this mean? It means suppliers are suddenly losing the massive moisture barrier and shelf life protection market previously dominated by metallized PET and BOPP films. Think about the consumer experience for a second. Pan masala relies entirely on highly volatile aromas, exact moisture levels, and intense flavor profiles. Without these specialized metallized films keeping moisture out and the flavor trapped inside, preserving that product becomes an absolute engineering nightmare. These materials weren't just chosen because they were cheap. They were uniquely perfect for extending shelf life in really harsh, humid climates. With this ban, the primary application for these highly specialized films in this massive consumer goods segment just evaporates, leaving suppliers scrambling to figure out what's next.
Let's look at the ripple effect in Section 4, Disruptions for Packaging Converters, Navigating the Supply Chain Shock.
This abrupt shift forces multi-layer flexo and rotographer pouch manufacturers into a highly disruptive transition phase. Just imagine being a packaging converter today. You've invested heavily to serve this specific market. Sitting right there on your factory floor are multi-million-dollar high-speed multi-layer laminators. But because of this new regulation, those machines, which were designed specifically to bond plastic and aluminum, are suddenly at risk of becoming completely stranded assets. That brings us to a brutal step 1, facing severe asset write-downs. You can't just flip a magic switch and make these machines run paper. Step 2 is the painful, hugely capital-intensive process of retooling your entire manufacturing operation to handle totally different physical materials with different tensions and tearing points. And step 3? That's the desperate scramble for raw materials. The entire industry has to pivot simultaneously to barrier-coated specialty paper or aqueous barrier coatings. The massive hurdle here is that global supply chain capacity for these high-barrier paper solutions is incredibly limited right now. Everyone is rushing through the exact same narrow door at the exact same time.
Now, Section 5, Surge in Alternative Packaging, the new market winners. Because hey, when one door closes, another one swings wide open.
As brand owners move away from traditional sachets, we're going to see a massive surge in demand for alternative, rigid packaging materials. Formats like tinplate, glass, and stiff paperboard are going to see a dramatic spike, especially for premium and bulk product lines. Tinplate containers are stepping up to replace multi-serve sachets. Glass jars, they're becoming the new standard for premium lines. And stiff paperboard boxes are basically poised to take over high-volume retail. But think about the massive logistical shockwave this creates behind the scenes. You're transitioning from completely weightless plastic sachets to heavy glass and rigid tinplate. This completely changes shipping weights, freight costs, and warehouse logistics. A truck that used to carry hundreds of thousands of plastic sachets might now max out on weight way before it even fills up on volume with glass jars. Logistics managers are going to be working overtime to figure this out, but the companies actually manufacturing these rigid formats, they are staring at an absolute gold rush.
Let's wrap things up with Section 6, Pricing and Market Outlook, Short-Term Pressures and Long-Term Gains.
Based on Polymer Bazaar's data, you should expect immediate pricing pressure and massive inventory builds for domestic BOPP and LLDPE. Why? Because what happens when a massive chemical plant suddenly loses its biggest customer segment? The machines don't just stop. The polymer plants keep running, which means inventory builds up incredibly fast. And to clear out those mounting stockpiles, suppliers are going to have to drop their prices aggressively. So, in the short term, you're going to see a highly competitive buyer's market for domestic BOPP and LLDPE film grades. These massive petrochemical companies will be fighting tooth and nail to push their excess capacity into other food, agriculture, or consumer goods packaging segments, which is going to drive prices down across the board.
Conversely, the undeniable winners gaining significant market share over the coming quarters will be the raw material suppliers for paper barrier coatings and eco-friendly naturally derived polymers. If you operate anywhere in the investment or raw material space, pay close attention because this right here is where the exponential growth curve is going to happen. This constraint in eco-friendly paper coatings is shaping up to be the single biggest gold rush and simultaneous bottleneck of the entire decade. As consumer goods giants scramble to comply with the 2026 mandate, the specialized companies that hold the patents, the specific raw materials, and the manufacturing capacity for these naturally derived barrier coatings are going to be in absolute control of the market. They are transforming overnight from a niche, premium, nice-to-have option into a legally mandated necessity for sheer survival.
We know the capacity for these new high-barrier paper solutions is heavily constrained, and when sudden, massive industry-wide demand collides with a severely constrained supply chain, basic economics tells us the prices are going to absolutely skyrocket. Brand owners are going to be caught in a brutal vice between legally mandated regulatory compliance on one side and rapidly soaring material costs on the other. It's a frantic race against the clock to secure supply lines and adapt manufacturing capabilities before that 2026 deadline hits. Thank you so much for joining this explainer. For deeper market intelligence and instant notifications, be sure to connect directly with Polymer Bazaar using the details on screen. You can visit them on the web or reach out directly on WhatsApp to get real-time news right to your phone. Connect with them to stay ahead of the curve, because I want to leave you with this final thought. As that 2026 deadline looms closer and closer, will the global supply chain actually manage to adapt in time, or are we about to watch soaring packaging costs completely consume industry profit margins? Something to think about. We'll see you on the next one.